Welcome into Top Shelf, presented by The Score. I'm your host, Levi Smith, joined by my guys, Kyle Cushman, John Matisz, Josh Wegman. And NHL trade season is here. We have the deadline coming up this Friday. Massive move already got made yesterday. I'm kidding. It was Connor Murphy to the Oilers. So
good move for the Oilers.
It's a good move for the Oilers, but the ball has started to roll. There's always that one trade that gets everything in motion. So it's the Connor Murphy to the Oilers deal this time around. We've got some predictions / previews. We're gonna have a little bit of fun. I had you guys each come up with two realistic trades of guys who probably should be on the move that are kind of leading all the big boards. Then I said, you know what, we got to have a little bit of fun. So I made you put together three unrealistic trades, is the way that I phrased it. But, you know, some even bigger names, some even bigger moves. So I'm curious to see what you guys have in that regard. But let's just get right into it. We'll start with the realistic trades that we or you guys think will actually happen. And we begin with you, Josh, and we begin with probably the number one guy on most of these big boards, Vincent Trocheck. It seems way more than likely that he will be moved. Where do you have him going, and what's the deal?
So I've got him going to the Minnesota Wild for Riley Heidt, Carson Lambos, and a 2027 first-round pick. I think Trocheck to the Wild is one of the most obvious landing spots. Bill Guerin, the GM of the Wild, obviously just picked Trocheck for Team USA. Chris Drury, the GM of the Rangers, was assistant GM on Team USA, so they have a good rapport built in. And the Wild really need a second-line center behind Joel Eriksson-Ek. I don't think they can win a cup if that second-line center is Ryan Hartman or Danila Yurov. Fine players, but I think better suited for the bottom six. So Trocheck comes in, addresses a huge need. He's on a pretty team-friendly contract. I think it's $4.5 million for a few more years. I just think it's a great fit, and I think it's a good return for the Rangers, too, who I think Drury really needs to not necessarily hit a home run, but at least hit a double or a triple, get some extra bases here after the disaster that was the Artemi Panarin trade, just to help win the Rangers fan base back a bit.
Yeah, Trocheck is like the most obvious name, to the point where he's talking to his kids about trades. And his kid is like, you can be traded, but I'm not going anywhere, which was an awesome quote to see. But I am very curious to see what a trade package for Trocheck looks like, because right-handed center, as you mentioned there, can play some key defensive situations and is very likely to move at the deadline. Like, he ticks a lot of the boxes where a lot of teams are probably going to be in this guy. So does a Heidt Lambos first-round pick combination, I think that's probably what he should be traded for, but I'm curious to see how much of a bidding war this actually turns into.
Yeah, these are always tough, and Height's having not a great year.
Iowa's been trashed this year in the AHL, which is...
But, it's his first professional season, still a lot of growth there. Lambos was a former first-round pick. He hasn't, done met expectations totally yet, so getting a bit of a project there. And then the first-round pick, I think it'd be a solid return of three key pieces. Lambos especially, you could throw him into the NHL and sort of see what he's got. Height probably still needs a bit more time, but... I think this would be a win-win for both sides. Obviously, I'm the one putting it together, so.
I like the idea of Trocheck ending up in Minnesota in terms of them having play-driving wingers. They have Boldy and Kaprizov, and I wouldn't say Trocheck is a play-driving center at this point in his career, given the lack of foot speed. But you need guys who can, win key face-offs, as we saw in the Olympics. Guys who can kill penalties.
He can put the puck in the net still.
He can score. There's a power play utility there with him in the bumper. So I feel like there's a good fit there stylistically, given what Minnesota already has in their forward group and what Trocheck can offer.
Biggest penalty kill maybe in the last decade of hockey, some might
17
say.
17 for 17. That's wild.
He was a part of it the whole time, and then at the end of that gold medal game, who did they trot out there? Vincent Trocheck. So, he's at the top of all these boards for a reason, and I really like the fit with Minnesota for every reason, especially they've got Quinn Hughes. This is a team, especially with how Bill Guerin's been operating. I wouldn't be surprised if this isn't the only move they make. They'll make splashes like this in that Quinn Hughes window before he decides his future. So I like it a lot. The only thing I thought was funny, because you're referencing Trocheck's kid, and he's in the headlines right now. And I was listening to Elliot Friedman talk about potential landing spots, and he doesn't have much control, but he would like to stay on the East. And then Friedman himself also said, I think he goes to Minnesota. So I was like, is that
well,
East
that was
enough?
the Quinn Hughes thing as well, right? Quinn Hughes was all going to go to the East, something about the East, and then he ends up in Minnesota. So maybe it's the happy medium.
Minnesota's the east of the
West.
The
east of the West.
I guess so. So, I like that deal a lot. Vincent Trocheck is the first name off our board. On to the next guy that you have for us, John. Robert Thomas, who's picked up a lot of steam. A lot of Blues are picking up a lot of steam, it feels like. But he's started to circulate a lot, and it seems like the Blues are just full-blown sellers at this point. So what kind of deal do you have for Robert Thomas?
Yeah, Robert Thomas, biggest fish in this free agent, or I should say deadline pond. I have him going to Utah for Cole
what a fun
Baudouin,
fit.
Barrett Hayton, 2 firsts and a third. And from Utah's perspective, Bill Armstrong, the GM there, since he's gone to Utah, has had sort of the shackles off of him. He's already picked up Sergachev in a big trade, Peterka in a big trade. And I think that it's kind of time to add that extra piece. And you look at the way that their forward group is constructed. You've got Clayton Keller and Logan Cooley, and then you've got Dylan Gunther. Well, how about throwing Thomas on that Gunther line? One of the best passers in the game, one of the best lethal one-shot shooters in the game, and then you let Keller and Cooley cook as the second top 6 line. So I love the fit in so many ways. Thomas would really blend into that core in terms of like his trajectory and his sort of age. He'd be, I guess, on the older side. He'd be more towards Keller in terms of the late 20s versus a lot of early 20 players on the Mammoth, but that's a good thing. And I also think, it's interesting in terms of like the connection, we talked about with Minnesota and New York, the GMs knowing each other, the GMs knowing the player. Well, Thomas was drafted by Bill Armstrong, not, directly, but he was the director of scouting for the Blues when St. Louis picked Thomas in 2017.
Significant role in the draft.
Yeah, like they would know each other personally because they would have had, meetings before the draft, and he would have tried to get to know Thomas on a personal level. So that's an important piece here. And I think from St. Louis's perspective, Barrett Hayton, it could be a third-line center for them long-term. Cole Baudouin is like a World Juniors level type of prospect. And then you've got your futures there. So, the thing is that like what sort of holds up this trade, is that St. Louis doesn't have to do a Robert Thomas trade right now. He's got, I believe, 4 or 5 more years after this one with his current deal at a really good number. Like he's a highly desirable asset. Yeah. So they certainly don't need to do this. But if Utah comes knocking and maybe instead of Baudouin, it's, TJ Ginla or, Dmitry Simashev, like kind of more polished prospects.
They've got a lot of prospects.
Yeah,
that can work into a trade like this.
So if Bill Armstrong really wants to, pry Thomas out of St. Louis, I think there's a real path here. But this is, kind of a package that I think works for both sides, at least on paper.
Yeah, I think this is a strong offer. Like Baudouin's had an unbelievable year in the OHL. You've got the current player there to replace him in the lineup. You've got some future pieces. I think the big question is like, are the Blues just trying to trade him this week and get the best offer? Or do they still need to be convinced by a big offer? And I think that's the difference here, where if the Blues are more in the mindset of like, okay, we're ready to kind of shake things up here, make a big move, this is an offer that I think works. If it's the Blues need to be convinced, I don't think this trade happens without a Caleb Desnoyers or a Daniil Boot or a Dmitry Simashev in this trade as that like top tier legit potential first line top pairing type piece in this trade. I think Baudouin's good, doesn't hit that level, and then you've got some futures in there. I think it's a strong offer, but I think the big question to be decided this week is like, does it take that kind of offer, or do you really have to level up and go after it? I think the big thing for Utah here is you mentioned the fit with Thomas and like Gunther and all these different players here. They should be chips in. Like, they should be trying to get this guy. Like, I think a lot of the time we look at some prospects and are like, man, if he turns out he could be Robert Thomas, just go get Robert Thomas now, right? Like that kind of thing. Like, I'd really like to see Utah go really strong after this guy.
Another dynamic here is that St. Louis is doing this succession plan where Doug Armstrong, after this season, is moving up to president of hockey ops, and Alexander Steen, the former forward for the Blues, is moving into the GM role. So I wonder if Steen, towards the deadline, is like, Doug, let me handle this in the summer. This is a really big piece. I'm the guy taking over this team. Let me handle this further down the road when I have my bearings as the GM. I don't know if that plays a factor. Obviously, they're already working in tandem, but it's kind of an interesting dynamic.
I was going to say, or does Armstrong just be like, let me have one more trade?
Let
me make one more splash here before
I almost think
let me show you how it's done.
Yeah, the other side of it could be like, does Steen want him gone? And it's like, hands off it. Hey, it wasn't my trade. It was somebody else's.
Plus, it obviously expedites any sort of rebuild, whatever they're doing in St. Louis. Kind of hard to tell exactly how deep they're going to go in terms of like, is this a 10-year rebuild, or are we trying to like retool?
Such a weird team right now.
3 or 4 years. Because it's obviously not being turned around quickly, but there's pieces there.
I mean, I think if you're trading Thomas, you're looking at a long view sort of rebuild.
He's their best player.
But, yeah.
Well, he's what, like 26?
Yeah,
like, that's
he's right in his
significant piece to
prime
move
on a
from.
team-friendly contract. So, yeah, I think they're not moving him unless they get a haul. And this is like a pretty good one. Like Kyle said, maybe lacking that top-tier prospect. But overall, I think it'd be a pretty good deal for both sides.
It seems, too, though, that Utah, it's like maybe they come to them with this, and then they're like, we need something else. They have the pieces to be able to do that, too. So, should be interesting. You guys want a fun segue? Speaking of Alexander Steen...
Here we go.
The Toronto Maple Leafs are terrible. They've lost every single game after the Olympic break. They've got some unrestricted free agents that, in my mind, have to be moved because obviously this team is not contending right now. You've got to trade for us, Kyle, who's on the move from Toronto.
Bobby McMann. I think he's the clearest, most obvious player to move here at the deadline for the Maple Leafs, just given he's on the verge of 30 here. He's a guy that they've developed into a really solid, useful player. He's on a cheap contract, and that's a fit that works for a lot of these contending teams that are going to be buying at the deadline here. We've gone with a couple of like heavy hitter ones here. This one's a lot more straightforward, where it's Bobby McMann, 50% retained to the Edmonton Oilers for Andrew Mangiapane. That's some cap work there. David Lewandowski, and then a first-round pick. So I think the big thing here that people might see some sticker shock is a prospect and a first-round pick for Bobby McMann. The reason I get there is the 50% retention. So McMann is actually less than the league minimum salary on the Oilers cap sheet. If that happens, it would be $675,000 against the cap, which would be significant for the Oilers. You're also getting off of an extra year of Andrew Mangiapane, so you're freeing up even more cap space in this trade. And to do both of those things simultaneously while acquiring Bobby McMann, I think you're going to have to pay up for that kind of thing. So in this kind of trade, it not only adds a legit third liner, somebody that could even play alongside Draisaitl, have that speed, size, goal-scoring ability, it also frees up the Oilers to add another almost $2 million cap hit at this deadline if they were to make this kind of trade. So I think this one's a lot more of like a more straightforward, typical trade deadline deal, but I like the fit of McMann with the Oilers. He's an Alberta native as well. The Leafs certainly need to move on from him this week and recoup some assets here so that they can at least figure some things out into the summer, whether they keep those assets long-term or move them for help in the summer. And like I mentioned, I really like the fit of McMann with the Oilers, and I think he's going to be a coveted piece by a lot of teams because he is that affordable cap hit. Like I think he would be a great fit on like Colorado and a bunch of different teams that are looking for some scoring help. So I think the fit of the Oilers, the cap help they get in this, and all of that makes the most sense for both teams in this trade.
Yeah, I think it's really fair. And the way I look at it is it's McMann 50% retained for a first is fair, and then the Leafs would be getting Lewandowski essentially for taking on Mangiapane, who's a negative asset right now, the way he's performed with his contract. So
just cleared waivers.
I like it a lot. And yeah, I mean, McMann, he didn't have a good playoff last year, but I think he fits that game where he's big, he's fast, he plays downhill and really direct, and he can really shoot the puck and change the game with one shot. So I like the fit. And maybe, again, you said because he's an Edmonton guy, maybe there's a chance you can re-sign him for maybe slightly below market value.
Is there? I like this Oilers Leafs pipeline where it's like, okay, we're close to the cup. Let's just continue to bring in old Leafs forwards. Connor Brown's that guy, man, Kapanen.
It's almost worked.
Bobby McMann, they're that close. My question is there any world do you think where the Leafs try to offload both McMann and Scott Laughton with them both being unrestricted free agents? Is there a team you think that would be willing to take on two kind of depth forwards like that?
Yeah, I think there's definitely some upside to potentially combining certain assets. Like before Edmonton's move this week for Connor Murphy, the idea I was having was Oliver Ekman-Larsson in this trade to Edmonton and having a combination of those two in a bigger package. Obviously, Stan Bowman had other ideas going out and getting Connor Murphy, so not necessarily the same need for a defenseman there. But whether it is combining with an Ekman-Larsson or a Scott Laughton, like I do think there is some potential upside to combining some of these assets to go from like potential second round pick for some of these players and a prospect or whatever to a higher end asset. Like I think if for example like Minnesota doesn't get a Vincent Trocheck type, like does bolstering their depth with a McMann and a Laughton really help there? I think there's a few teams that could do some stuff like that.
Yeah, totally agree. I would very much like to see it as a Leafs fan. So hopefully we get
they need to do a bunch of stuff.
They need a lot of shaking.
I think McMann is the easiest one. That is, if you don't get that done, then significant questions need to be asked.
It'll be interesting. Okay, 3 trades in. We've got another big fish here. One thing, like I did want to mention off the top of that, it feels like such a buyer's market. Like there's so many teams that just have guys that they're willing to get off with. Like the Leafs have all these guys, the Blues have all these guys. So I think it should be, maybe not the biggest of big names like the Rantanens and stuff we saw last year, but definitely a lot of teams looking to move some pretty solid players. Another team that might be doing that with one of their other guys. They did it with Quinn Hughes, Elias Pettersson. Josh, you've got him on the move. Where do you think he goes?
I've got him going to Carolina. I think it's more than likely he gets moved in the offseason, but if he were to get moved in season, I think the Hurricanes make a lot of sense as a contender with loads of cap space and assets to trade. So I've got him going to the Canes for Jesperi Kotkaniemi, Felix Unger-Sorum, a first in 2027 in 2026, and then a second in 2027. I think it's tough to gauge Pettersson's trade value because he's still a solid player. Obviously, he's not what he was a few years ago, and his cap number is ginormous. But in this move, Kotkaniemi's really, that contract is a headache for the Canes. So they got him coming back to Vancouver. Maybe he can sort of rehabilitate his career in Vancouver. Unger-Sorum is having a great year in the AHL.
Really good player.
Like point-a-game guy. Like definitely probably NHL ready, but he's essentially blocked in Carolina. So I think moving him would be wise for Carolina. And yeah, I mean, it's really tough to gauge, but I think Pettersson, maybe Carolina's a spot where he could find it. He doesn't have to be the guy. He can be that second-line center behind Sebastian Aho. And in Carolina, I mean, do you think they can win a cup with Logan Stankoven as the number 2 center? Like,
Nope.
I think he's more of a winger. He showed okay at center, but I think ideally he's on the wing. So, yeah. What do you guys think?
This would be such a massive win for Vancouver. Like, you tossed in Kotkaniemi, so that's important in terms of like the full package. But it still jumps off the page in terms of being steep. Like Carolina could get him for cheaper, but maybe I'm missing something.
I have no clue what his value is. Like
Super tough.
Like Josh mentioned, like he's still like a useful player to an extent, but it's like
it's the
almost
contract.
12
Like
million.
it's less now about the player, and it's like the contract is so onerous that it's like,
But it's
are you basically giving him away at this point, or are you going to get something of value back?
The way I'm sort of thinking of it, because I think word out, like what we're seeing reports are teams want Vancouver to retain, and it doesn't seem like they want to, which is totally fair. But with Kotkaniemi going back the other way, like you're essentially getting a retainment if you think about it from that way, because Kotkaniemi's making $4.5 million to be a 4th-line center who isn't an amazing defensive player or anything like that. So I think like splitting the difference between the money almost makes it more justifiable.
I don't think, like I will say with the Elias Pettersson stuff, because I was looking into it more the last couple of days, he's not going to be valued, obviously, as like the player he once was, and we've sat here and talked
Still
about.
only 27, though. Like, it's possible, I think,
Well, that's where I was
kind of
going to. Like, I'm looking, you pull up the Vancouver Canucks leading scorers, he's first on that list. 35 points in 52 games isn't pretty, but I mean, Filip Hronek second. Like, this is a team that just nobody can do anything. So he's not in like a very good position to produce or even come close to those numbers he's had before. He's also played like 8 less games than the rest of the guys on that team. So it's not like, I don't think he's as bad as like, some people are making him out to be. It's tough when a guy falls from grace as hard as he does, because you just auto assume that, this guy's a bum, like he's a bust, like he's never coming back. So I think in the right spot, he could be a good fit. I don't know how much power and leverage Vancouver has to pitch that to teams, being like, listen, this is a good player, but he's got to be in the right spot. But I think it should be interesting. And Carolina, like how many times have we heard this with a deadline coming up? Oh, they're in a great spot to kind of take a swing on another guy. So I think it makes sense. I definitely don't mind it. And I just really want to change the scenery for Pettersson.
One of the most curious cases, like
It's
in
crazy.
terms of going like this and then just plummeting.
And we thought the Olympics might be like a great place for him to kind of rekindle his game. And
Didn't really happen.
didn't really happen. So I don't know how many more
think
chances he
if
has.
there's a GM out there who maybe is thinking outside the box, it's Eric Tulsky, and thinking this guy's super talented, get him into our system, get him into our team, maybe we can turn him around. So who knows?
I'd take a swing on him if I had the
cap space.
The cap space and stuff. But I'm also not a GM, so that might be for the best. We got the next trade here, Nashville, another team that's just nobody knows what's going on with them. Ryan O'Reilly, John, where do you think he's headed?
I'm sending Ryan O'Reilly to Colorado, back to Colorado.
Wow.
His
Nice
old
little
stomping
home cooking.
grounds. And Nashville is getting in return Ilya Nabokov, a pretty good goalie prospect, a 1st and a 4th. And, as sort of a half joke, they're getting Nabokov because they traded away Askarov. It's like you're, righting a wrong, so to speak. But a good prospect. I think that they would legitimately want him. And I think, O'Reilly's such an interesting situation because he doesn't have trade protection, but apparently Barry Trotz has promised him unofficial trade protection.
Why not just give him the trade protection?
I know,
Then
and
that's
it's
the-
like it's a cutthroat 32-team league, and you're
Yeah.
just basically giving guys favors
Yeah.
mid-season. Strange approach, but it is what it is. So I mean, I think if O'Reilly did want to go somewhere, what's better than the best team in hockey and a team that could slide him in at that third line center spot and have Jack Drury go to the fourth line, and both those guys would be overqualified in their position. But that's how you win cups, right? You have guys overqualified further down your lineup. So I think O'Reilly would probably welcome it. I think he's having a very underrated season.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very strong season. And, the price is right in terms of Sam Girard getting moved out last week, and Colorado clearly doing that for a reason, a.k.a. adding a player sooner than later. And guess what? Ryan O'Reilly gets paid slightly less than Girard, so I think they can fit him in fairly easily, and they have him for next year too. So it's not a huge commitment where you go, is he going to fall off a cliff here soon? It's just one extra year. And if you're Nashville, listen, if you are actually dedicated to some sort of like deep retool, rebuild, whatever you want to call it, I think you have to move a guy like him now when the price is going to be high versus next year. What does he look like at 36 years old? And next thing you know, you're selling low.
Yeah, he's got some juice in the tank for sure. He's having a very solid year, and this is how you go from being that very good team to actually winning a Stanley Cup. Is the Avs making a move like this? Oh, I'd be all in on that. I mean, I'm all in on them already, but
I love the potential.
love. Yeah,
Apparently,
Could be
O'Reilly
really
and
fun.
McKinnon are still like friends too.
Good
So
boys.
that's, yeah, but I honestly think if Nashville is going to trade O'Reilly, I think they'd have to get more than this. Just because he has another year left, they don't have to force things. He's having such an awesome year, like he's almost at a point a game. So I think if this is their best offer on the table, they're best waiting to the offseason, maybe seeing what else they can do. Just the first is nice, but Nabokov, we don't really know with goalie prospects. He's not like some no doubt can't miss goalie prospect either. So, like I look back to the Brock Nelson trade last year, what Colorado gave up for Nelson, and it was a first and Cal Ritchie, who's like a really higher end prospect. So I think Nashville should want something more guaranteed coming back, whether that's a younger player. I don't know if Colorado has that to offer, but I think the return is just lacking a little bit for me.
Yeah, I agree. I think the second or third piece here needs to be upgraded to, again, a situation, we kind of mentioned it earlier, where the team isn't forced to make the move now, so you almost have to force their hand by giving them that kind of top-tier offer.
Yeah. Last but not least, we've got the first defenseman on our list. Last but not least of the realistic trades. The unrealistic trades. But yeah, first defenseman on this list, Dougie Hamilton. What's the Dougie Hamilton landscape looking like?
Yeah, well, like a month or two ago, it looked like things were going to be disastrous for Dougie Hamilton and the Devils. Things have kind of cooled off since, but I still think it makes a lot of sense for the Devils to move on from his cap hit here and try and find a suitor. I've got Dougie Hamilton to the Detroit Red Wings for Carter Mazur, a prospect who's been injured most of the year, and a second and third round pick. And this is where, again, kind of similar to the Pettersson discussion, where it's good player, useful player, elevated, inflated cap hit. Where does he fall on that value scale? And I think it's in a place where you might be able to get him for a little bit cheaper than if his contract was like half that. For the Red Wings, they have so much cap space to spend, and that's why I've got them as the fit here to take on this cap hit, where you can take on the full $9 million. They have like $18 million in playoff deadline space, so that's just looking at the roster, not even like the crazy amount of like deadline cap space they have based on the way that it's accrued over the season. And they desperately need another defenseman in addition to Moritz Seider and Simon Edvinsson, where they lean so much on those two guys. And you've got a couple of decent players in behind them on the blue line. But I think Dougie Hamilton is a guy that is still playing like 22 minutes a night for the Devils. He can come into the Red Wings, can play a lesser role on a potential Red Wings team behind Seider, can play in some more offensive situations. And I think we've seen recently here, since the new year, he has like 15 points in 19 games. Like, he still has some juice left. It's just, what is he now at this point in his career? Not a $9 million defenseman, not that 1A type defenseman, but I think he has enough left, and I think the Red Wings are in a place to take a shot on a guy like Hamilton, given where they are in the standings, helps address a significant need, and then you can kind of go on from there. So I think this would be a really intriguing fit for a team that in the Devils need to clear out some cap space and can move on from Hamilton and have a bunch of defensemen to alleviate his loss in the lineup and be a significant addition to the Red Wings, who are trying to make the playoffs for the first time in forever and try to do something with that run as well.
I like the idea of bumping down Sandin Pellikka, who's a good player and has a bright future, but is maybe slotted a little high right now in the second pair. And then maybe Ben Sherrod and Dougie Hamilton. I like that as a second pair when you've got Edmondson and Sider playing pretty monster minutes. So I like the fit here. And, when you look at Detroit's cap picture, it's not just this year, right? It's moving forward. So they can easily handle Hamilton moving forward. And yeah, like if I'm Jersey, it's almost like you're at the point where you're like, let's just move on. Yeah. Not that this package is bad, but it's like, let's say 2 years ago, you'd be going, oh, you didn't get a first for Dougie Hamilton, but that's just where we are now. Yeah.
I think it's a win-win, honestly. Like, I really like both sides of this trade, and the Devils have just the surplus of, they could trade 13 defensemen and still have, 5 more, really sick prospects. So, I like it. Time for him to move on. Okay. 3 wild trades now.
I thought we already did one of those at the beginning. Sorry.
But yeah, no, these are the ones, let's take some big swings. Let's see some big names get moved around.
Let's get a little bit silly.
Let's get a little bit silly. And you know what? If one of these is right, we look like the biggest hockey geniuses ever. So we'll start with you, Josh. You have a Jordan Kyrou move. So we've talked about the Blues already, but you think that they send somebody else packing.
All right, I didn't go as high on the silly meter as, maybe I could have or maybe I've done in the past. But I got Kyrou going to the Seattle Kraken for Shane Wright and 2 first-round picks.
Okay.
The key caveat being the 2 first-round picks are both Tampa Bay's, not Seattle's. And those are the picks they got in the Bjorkstrand-Gord trade from last year. Right. So, Kyrou, his name's been out there like everyone on the Blues, basically not having a great year, but just a super productive player over the last few years. The analytics people love him. He scores big goals. And Shane Wright's, his name has been out there. He hasn't quite delivered on the expectations, but for the Blues, what they're doing, this rebuild, getting all these assets, maybe he's a guy they'd like to bring in. Hopefully he can blossom there, maybe with some more minutes. So, again, this is a trade I think probably more likely for the offseason, Kyrou, but if it could happen, I think this is the type of swing the Kraken would want to take where they're keeping both their first-round picks and they're getting a player who's really good. You already know what kind of the baseline level of production you're getting. Plus, he's still only 27, pretty team-friendly contract, like $8 million for the next few years. I think if a guy like Kyrou was hitting free agency now, he's probably getting more than that. So I like this move for the Kraken. I think it's a solid return for the Blues, but, we'll see.
I kind of love this. Like, you think about the report when Shane Wright's name went out there was they're looking for like a needle-moving winger, which was a bit interesting because you're moving a center for a winger type, and they were really heavily in on Artemi Panarin was the report as well, offered him significantly more than the Kings did before he ended up being traded or wanting to be traded to LA. So if you're moving out Shane Wright, you're getting that like legit needle-moving top 6, top line winger. 2 first-round picks that are probably going to be in the mid to late 20s. I kind of like this move there, and it's really interesting to me that we've heard Robert Thomas's name pop up here recently, but not Kyrou, when Kyrou was the guy that we were all expecting to be traded last summer and then wasn't. I wonder if that is the sneaky guy here this week where all the attention's being paid to Robert Thomas and it ends up being Kyrou. That's the big move. Yeah,
Kyrou's had the rocky relationship with the Blues, whereas Thomas is kind of like the golden boy there, so you make a good point where why are we focusing on Thomas so much? This specific trade aside, I don't get why the Kraken are trying to trade Shane Wright. Like, I think it's going to be a massive mistake. This guy's still super young. Sure, is he not living up to his draft position at 4th, but I think that he's going to be, a big-time playoff performer. I love how he gets to the net and is able to sort of cause havoc there. And I just think, the growth is taking a bit longer than you would hope, but it's just one of those things where I feel like they're just kind of pulling the trigger on something or potentially pulling the trigger on something that they're going to regret because they're sort of hungry to make the playoffs. They're not thinking long term.
You'd think, too, that a team like the Kraken who was willing to give Capo Caco a chance, they're like, let's get on the other side of it. Let's deal away a guy before anything's really happened.
I think maybe the thought is, though, why he's kind of out there is where he still has this amazing prospect shine on him and teams are super high on him. Where
that's fair.
If he plays another, say, year and a half and he's still kind of middling and hasn't really established himself yet, then his trade value kind of goes down and he turns into one of those sort of reclamation projects.
Yeah, if you've decided he's not part of our core, then sure, this is the time to trade him.
Yeah, the other aspect there is like how comparable is he to Matty Beniers? And then you have Jake O'Brien coming up and you have Berkeley Catton. So you have some options as centers.
For sure, they're deep.
Going forward.
They draft a center.
Exactly. I think they've still never drafted a defenseman in the first round, at least in the top 10. So they've got some options here, which is why I believe some of the stuff around Shane Wright rather than kind of dismissing it. And I think St. Louis would be a really intriguing fit, especially if they move on from Thomas, because then it's one for one. You swap him in there and you get younger. Like, there's some reasons to do that.
Yeah. Okay, moving on to the next one. This one's fun. Hopefully you can remember all this, John. But another guy who's been all over the big boards, he's finally come out and said that he wants to be traded against, what the reports last year was like, oh, he doesn't want to be traded. We're not moving him.
Well, it was like the owner earlier.
It was in like November, I think.
Yeah,
it wasn't
we were like,
to be fair, last year they were kind of in the playoff hunt a bit, so it was a little different. But now,
do we need it to be fair? The Flames. Come on.
Poor Aiden was coming in for every show, being like, man, I want us to lose. Like, why are we keeping these guys? Nazem Kadri, that's who we're talking about. But you've got a loaded package here involving Nazem Kadri. Let's hear it.
Yeah, I'm going for like the quantity over the quality here. Although these are 3 perfectly good players, but Nazem Kadri, Mackenzie Weegar, Blake Coleman, all going to Detroit for Nate Danielson, JT Compher, basically to make the money work. 2 firsts and a second. And so
that's it.
Basically, Yzerman is doing his free agency shopping at the deadline here, and I feel like when you make a move with a team that has all these pieces, as the buyer, you almost somehow sneakily get away with kind of not offering as much as you would if you did them in individual trades. If that makes any sense. So Kadri, he would be sort of like the Ryan O'Reilly replacement here. In terms of going to Detroit, where O'Reilly may end up, who knows? Mackenzie Weegar, we talked about a right-hand defenseman. Blake Coleman, playoff player. I think that the reason why Detroit would do this now is that, one, they've saved all their bullets. It's kind of the narrative around Yzerman. He's been way too conservative. And now, coming off the Olympics, where Larkin, Raymond, Seider all leveled up, all have, kind of like next level confidence in themselves and are sort of leading this team potentially to the 2nd seed in the Atlantic, I think it's time to make a major move. And you have the pieces in terms of Nate Danielson being just one of like 3 legitimately strong forward prospects. Maybe, Calgary comes back and says, hey, we want Nygaard instead of Compher, and then we got to figure out the money a different way. And I think I'd probably still do it if I'm Detroit. But I like this trade, of course, for both teams. Otherwise, I wouldn't have put it out there. But now that I see it, maybe another, prospect, a B-level prospect, or 3rd or 4th rounder might make more sense if I'm.
Yeah, let's get 3 or 5 more pieces.
Let's go. There wasn't enough room in the graphic, right? So
I actually really like the return for Calgary. I mean, you're clearing so much money off your books down the line, and like obviously Kadri and Weegar are both great players right now, but those contracts could maybe get a little dicey in a few years. So I like the idea of just totally clearing your books long term, getting a bunch of picks. And Danielson, they really need young centers. Compher's a guy maybe you can flip for in a couple years for something else. So I like the return for Calgary a lot. I know Kadri's kind of the headliner here, but I think Weegar is the best player in this deal. Like, he's such an awesome player, and we talked about it already with Detroit. Like, you can't go – if you're serious about making some noise in the playoffs, you can't go in there with Sandeem Pellikka and Ben Sherratt as your number 2 pair. And I think Weegar would be that ultimate complement of someone who can drive that second pair behind Seider and Edvinsson. And he can play either side, too, which is a huge bonus.
Yeah, I love all these fits on like a Detroit team. Like, all of them have a significant impact on that lineup and would be worthwhile giving up all those assets. Obviously, we just don't really see trades of this caliber with like this many significant pieces being traded hands. But I'd love to see it. I'd love to see it suggested. And like, why just do one of these? Like, you have the cap room, you have the assets. Go out and make a splash.
Yeah, now's the time for the Yzer plan.
Exactly. This is what he's been waiting for. And honestly, like, I'm not even joking about the free agency aspect of it. There's no players to acquire in the offseason, and Detroit has hundreds, or not hundreds,
They've
tens
got a
of
lot of
thousands,
money.
tens of millions of cap space moving forward. I don't
One
know
of
the
the
exact.
three.
Yeah, a lot of cap space.
This is not a math show.
No.
No, I'm such a sucker too for like a team pulling in like more than one guy from other. It's like, oh, let's bolster like half of our forward unit with another team's forward unit. I love when that stuff happens. I know it wasn't. They ended up getting there together, but when the Kings decided, let's bring in Mike Richards, let's also bring in Jeff Carter.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
like,
Yeah.
This is awesome. So
Good show.
I definitely like this trade for Detroit. I think they're going to make a big splash. So last trade here, and I loved seeing this one come across my desk here because boy, is this ever a pipeline. We have the New York Rangers doing business once again with the Anaheim Ducks, Kyle. Let's hear about this trade. Adam Fox on the move.
Yes, the Anaheim Ducks acquire Adam Fox for top 10 pick Roger McQueen, top 10 pick Pavel Mintyukov, and a first-round pick. I wasn't really considering Adam Fox as a player on the move until over the past few days. We heard him asked about kind of his thoughts on staying through a retool or his future, and his answer was basically, we'll talk about that in the summer, which is basically as nice you can say I'm non-committal as possible. And obviously this would be happening before that conversation happened. So this is probably one of those moves that you maybe look to at the draft or something like that. But I love the fit of Fox with kind of any of like a handful of teams, with the Ducks in the mix here, obviously for this trade, but I also think about like a San Jose as a really intriguing fit as well. I have the Ducks here mainly because they're in the mix right now, so there's incentive to go and try and make that trade now. But I look at the right side of their defense and what it looks like going forwards. You have Jacob Trouba, obviously, acquired from the Rangers, expiring deal. Radko Gudas, expiring deal. You've got nothing on the right side going forward. And even if you re-sign both or even just one of those guys, they're mid to late 30s. Like, those are not guys you can plan for long term. And you're too good now to go out and draft one of those top-end defensemen. So the only way you're going to get one is either in free agency, nobody's getting free agency anymore, or going out and making a big splash if somebody like Adam Fox became available. So I love the fit in that regard because it both makes the team better now and is that top-end defenseman that you can add alongside a Lacombe and a Zellweger or a Luno and a bunch of these guys that they still have, even if you're giving up a Mintyukov, who is that 20-minute defenseman today, who is still young, has that top 10 pedigree. And then Roger McQueen is a big piece of this to really make the Rangers intrigued because he's a 6'6" center who's having a really good season right now as a freshman in the NCAA, coming off of being the 10th overall pick, has kind of put aside some injury concerns that were there in his draft year. So you're getting 3 premium pieces for Adam Fox, who, again, we've kind of talked about a few of these guys where we don't really know how much they're valued around the league, where, at least for me, I value him more than probably what he's going to be traded for if he's traded. Just given he's probably still a top 10 defenseman in the NHL, but wasn't on Team USA and has kind of really had a reputation hit coming after off of the Four Nations. Like, there was a point in time when you think about like an Adam Fox potential trade or what that would look like, probably thinking a lot more in line with like what Quinn Hughes trade looked like. I would be surprised if there was a trade with Adam Fox that was quite that caliber now, even though this is getting pretty close to it with McQueen and Mintyukov in the mix here.
Yeah.
But I would love to see a huge splash this week of Adam Fox going out the door after kind of not really being talked about as a guy that the Rangers would move on from, and go to a Ducks team who's been so much fun to watch, like multiple comeback wins here recently, going to overtime, fun young core, but a lot of forwards in that mix versus not a lot of defensemen coming through specifically on the right side. I think it's a great fit for both teams, and I think the Rangers would be getting a huge package here that would make it worth their while for Adam Fox.
I love the return for the Ducks, and I love the fit for basically all the reasons you mentioned. I think it'd be a little light of a return for the Rangers to move Adam Fox, given the term he has on his contract, and they don't have to force this move. McQueen is a really exciting prospect, but I think they're missing almost something a little more guaranteed, like more of, I know Mintyukov is in there, but he's kind of...
I wouldn't call him a guarantee
yet. His stock is down. I think they're missing, that sort of guaranteed guy who's already in the NHL to sort of make this deal work, I think, but...
I love it.
I love the idea of McQueen joining Matt Rempe and who's it, Enstrom, who's also 6'7", like just like the giants of the New York Rangers.
If you're acquiring Roger McQueen, you're hoping he's not your fourth line center. To be very clear,
but in warm up, think of the intimidation factor.
No kidding.
No, this is a pretty fun trade, and like, it's not fantasy land in terms of like these teams trade often. The Ducks clearly need a right-hand defenseman. And, Chris Drury is probably looking for sort of a safe place to put Adam Fox, so to speak, in terms of the types of assets he can get back. Now, does he fumble the bag on developing Roger McQueen? That's a question for another day, given the Rangers' track record with developing young players. But it's a good, because I feel like Mintyukov is almost maligned in Anaheim for no reason. So it's a change of scenery for him could be super helpful for him ending up on a top pair.
Him with Gavrikov?
Yeah.
Intriguing.
Could be fun.
Two tools, you guys.
Yeah, all right, so those are the 9 trades you guys have all brought to the table. I have one more thing I'm springing on you, and I kept you guys in the dark about this because I wanted to see your live reactions. But I would be remiss if I didn't bring up Auston Matthews.
Oh, boy.
I'm dead serious because the way that things are headed with Toronto, they're losing every game after the Olympic break. They're starting to become a narrative where would there be a better time to sell than right now? And I know it sounds crazy, but he's got 2 years left on his contract. He just won an Olympic gold. Maybe he's thinking, oh, you know what? I'm not going to win in Toronto in the next 2 years. Maybe he indicates, you know what? I think I'll probably be getting out then. I don't think it's going to happen, obviously. But if you're the Leafs, after what just happened to Mitch Marner, is there any slight indication that comes from Matthews and you're like, oh my gosh, we got to get him out the door? What do you guys think of that? Because I just genuinely, with where I know I'm overreacting with how bad that they've been and they're selling at the deadline for the first time in a long time, but with where things are headed, it doesn't look so great. And if he wants to get out, is there a real world where the Toronto Maple Leafs trade Auston Matthews at some point? Maybe not this deadline, but at all.
I'd like to see 1 year of Gavin McKenna on his wing first. No, 0% chance. He's the best player in franchise history. That's the kind of player you ride out with until the absolute final minute when you have to make a decision.
I agree, obviously, and I don't think that it's maybe wise to trade Auston Matthews, but given what just happened, they lose Marner for effectively absolutely nothing, and the next thing you know, they've taken 5 steps back. There's all the progress they built up is gone. So that's my biggest concern.
I think we're still just a year out from this potentially being a conversation. If next season goes as badly for the Leafs as this season has, then I think that becomes a real possibility, because I think it would be fair to wonder if he would want to stick around, which at that point would probably have to be a significant overhaul. So I think we're not quite there yet. I think the hope for the Leafs is that they can sort of bounce back and be a playoff team again next year, looking a little different, and then maybe Matthews is down to stay for as long as possible. But I think if next year is going horribly again, it's absolutely going to be the talk of hockey, basically.
Yeah.
I mean,
at this perspective, John?
At this exact moment in time, there's 2 paths that the Leafs can take, right? There's sort of let's just call it retooling and rebuilding. Yeah. Rebuilding includes see a Matthews, see a Nylander. I don't think the rebuild makes sense when you have the retool option where these are guys still in their prime. Ride that out. If that doesn't work, blow the thing up. But once you get rid of Matthews and Nylander, you're looking for your next Matthews and Nylander in terms of impact players. And guess what? The Leafs don't have it in their pipeline. So it'd be a serious, 10-year commitment. Maybe not 10 years. 5 to 10-year commitment. Probably 10 years. So I just feel logically it makes way more sense to at least give it 1 more year. Maybe 2. Obviously, Nylander is signed longer than Matthews. But, there is the option, I suppose, in the summer that, Matthews goes to them and says, listen, at the end of this contract, I'm going elsewhere. And then it would only make sense for Toronto to at least, huddle and figure out, okay, does it make sense to shop him now, or do we try 1 more year and then shop him later?
Yeah, I saw, when I was doing a little bit of digging on this, the one team that I think was most linked to him was the Kings. The LA Kings.
Makes
I
sense.
think makes sense for at least him, too. That's probably, you can go over there and live with Justin Bieber, who's over there now, his good buddy. So lots of things that make sense, but the fact that we're talking about a guy.
The fact that you brought it up. Hey, don't loop us in here.
Hey, I'm just a messenger.
Things are dire in Leafland.
I'm just a messenger here. I've been scrolling a little bit too much on my timeline.
Sounds like you've been enjoying watching the Leafs recently.
Yeah, absolutely not. But yeah, this is a fun episode. Excited to see, how many. I think we've been right on a couple. We've been right on some transactions before on this show. So curious to see, where guys move with this big Friday deadline coming up. We'll be back next Tuesday to recap it all. So looking forward to that episode. But yeah, it's been fun getting back into the NHL swing of things after the Olympic gold medal game loss is kind of worn off yet.
Jeez, wasn't any guys bringing up Matthews traded and the gold medal game? Jeez.
Do you want to remind us that the Jays lost in game
Yeah,
one
no
of the World
kidding,
Series,
right?
Yeah, you know, I'm just trying to work out the kinks of the somberness. I'm not used to losing yet, so it's all still crashing down on me. But no, all jokes aside, thank you to everyone who's been a part of this episode. We'll see you guys next week. This has been Top Shelf.